To do it. So, LeVar, over to you. Yeah.
Thank you, Todd. Oh, I guess it's working. I have a question for Dr. Modry. The Alberta Prosperity Project is an educational organization, and as I understand, I believe there have been a lot of people concerned about issues that have come up today, and I'm wondering, do you have some Q&A answers on your system?
Yeah, good question. We've been at this for a few years now. We've given hundreds of presentations, podcasts. On the website, where there's an FAQ section, so if you look at the taskbar at the top, you'll see various headings, education, etc. In the FAQ, frequently asked questions section, we've answered about 71 questions, some of the most important questions that are relevant to that, people might be concerned about. And just to give you an example of one of them, I can address, the majority of them anyhow, because we've been doing it for so long. But on the issue of being landlocked, there's a little bit more to add. For example, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, Articles 124 and 125, give the right of landlocked countries such as Switzerland or Austria both access to tidewater and access along land as well for the transporting of goods and services. Notwithstanding that, the majority of our trade, 90% plus, goes south. But as Todd did indicate, we're really policy locked. We're not landlocked, we're policy locked. And like he said, we're not, as a sovereign nation, we wouldn't be without clout, because we could block transfer of goods and services across our borders east and west, either tariff, add a 30% or 50% tariff on anything that's going back and forth, or in fact, we could block it altogether. It wouldn't be in the interest of the rest of Canada to embargo Alberta. We very strongly believe that saner minds will prevail in these sorts of discussions. Thank you, LeVar. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Don't go anywhere, Dennis.
Alberta Prosperity Project, you alluded during your speech very small on the question. What is the question? What does it look like?
All right. That's a good question as well. I'm not sure if everybody has recognized that we've released the sovereignty question publicly already. But the question was drafted by two constitutional lawyers, one of them, Jeff Rath, who's general counsel for the Alberta Prosperity Society. And the question goes like this. Do you agree that the province of Alberta shall become a sovereign country and cease to be a province of Canada? That question follows the exact terminology in the Clarity Act. So it should be a question that will be approved by Elections Alberta when it is submitted. And with respect to the petition, the actual gathering of the signatures, well, as a consequence of everything that we're doing, we have right now somewhere around 15,000 volunteers. So we expect that there will be no problem gathering the signatures within a 120-day period, should it be the case that the new threshold of 177,000 is proclaimed into law in June. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Dave will bring the mic over, Kathy, if the...
I'm already headed that direction.
Okay.
So I have two questions for the panel, so which one wants to answer?
There's the mic.
Can you hear me now? Okay. So I have two questions, and they're for the panel, so whoever is wanting to answer it would be great. So name the 5 best reasons as to why we need to become an independent society.
Well, here I've had to be brief with my answers, and you've fired a big loaded one to me here. The 5 best reasons for an independent West. I don't know if I can do it in a countdown, but a number that hits me: renewal. Renewal. We're in an obsolete system. That's one of the things I didn't touch upon when I spoke earlier. We got to remember too, it's not the party in charge that's broken, it's the system that's broken. And as long as people think it's the party, that's another mistake we'll keep making on the federal front and throwing more parties in there while the system stays the same. So we've got an opportunity because we got a system that was created 100 and some years ago, a system that was meant to ease us out of basically the feudal system. So what was superior to that is not a modern system that respects freedom, that respects ambition, that respects personal rights. So I'll just kind of leave it at that, because if I start listing all 5, we could be here much, much longer. But if we get a proper system, a proper constitution that does protect all of those important freedoms, rights, and abilities, it will cover all of the other reasons people have to want to go. But we need a new system if we want to have any of those things.
Thank you.
Okay, the first very simple reason, and I've cited this already, is to get out from under the oppressive regulations and taxation of the federal government. That's one thing. But I want to remind you of what we're facing as well as a reason. As Mr. Carney has pointed out, the way in which he wants to deal with what he said is that Western civilization is morally corrupt, and capitalism is the root cause of it. Then his solution is to restrict personal freedoms, to restrict business, to restrict agriculture, and to restrict the financing of companies that are not following environmental, social, and governance dictates. In other words, because of climate change. So I would add to that another important reason, I believe, is the issue of values. And I think the values of Mr. Carney with respect to the oppression of individuals, the inability that the perspective that he has on restricting our freedoms, I think, and our prosperity are critically important. There's a movement to remove family as the center or as the pillar of society, to pass off to your children and your children's children, self-reliance, wisdom, values. There's a movement that way. There's a movement to restrict, particularly in Quebec right now, we're seeing the restriction of religious freedom as well. So these are some of the important reasons that I think are critically important for us. But at the end of the day, what Corey just said, when you can't change the system, then what do? You have to leave. It's just like a failed marriage.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Jordan Peterson said Justin Trudeau is just an incompetent buffoon. But he said Mark Carney is actually an evil person. And I mean, he is all in on, carbon net zero and like carbon net zero, if you think about it, here we are fat and happy in one of the wealthiest food producing regions in the world. And carbon net zero, what we're actually talking about is starving someone to death in a developing country. So don't fool yourself. You're not talking about helping the environment or any of this bullshit. it. When you're talking about carbon net zero, like our premier often does, you're talking about starving somebody to death in a poor country. And I don't think God gave us all the resources we've got so that we can let somebody starve to death in a poor country while we're fat and happy. So, like, I mean, to me, this just doesn't make any sense to be in a country that has the same values as Mark Carney does.
Amen.
I just wanted to add one word response: hope.
Perfect.
It's all well and good. My mom used to say to Dad that it's easy to criticize, but if you don't have a solution, you're better off to just shut your trap. And that's what, so I think you bring up an excellent question. I think it's actually something that we need to work on, is the vision of this new Alberta. But I think we have it. We just haven't, we're still working on it, and we have to be open to the possibilities. But our young people look at what's going on and they are without hope. We have to bring them hope. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I'd add one more thing, so when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister, there was a point in time when he was talking about Canada becoming or being an energy superpower. Anybody remember that? Hands up. Yep. Remember what happened to our dollar when he was talking that way? Anybody? $1.05. Remember what was happening in the press at that time? Anybody? Quebec and Ontario lost their minds. We can't compete with $1.05. We rely on a subpar dollar with the United States for our economies to be able to export. Our values, our societal goals, everything in terms of our economy, we are diametrically opposed to the Eastern requirements. We're entrepreneurial. We're conservatives. I mean, we had this abomination of a Notley government, but that was a protest vote. That's the only way I'm looking at that. They're socialists voting on communism. They love their socialism. We don't. And if we thrive and our dollar goes above $1.05, they don't. And they know it, and that's why they ultimately vote against us. Time and time and time and time and time and time again, since the very beginning.
Thank you. So the next question I have is not if we separate, but when we do. What happens to our crown land, like Banff and Jasper? Do they come with us?
Yes.
Yes?
It's attached. It isn't going anywhere.
Awesome.
You know what? When we talk about the terms of divorce, well, guess what, guys? We're gonna negotiate Banff. We're gonna negotiate Jasper, and no, it's not staying with Ottawa. And at the end of the day, that'll be part of our discussions. Yep. No. No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Like, we sort of touched on this, and that's the Indian reserves, which are also Crown land, as you know. Mm-hmm. And our wild rose policy is that if we vote to leave, well, then the First Nations will have to have another vote because they're on federal government land inside our country. So we will ask them to have another vote, and they can have a vote, and if they want, they can stay on their Crown land inside the country. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That'll be their choice. But if they vote to come with us, well, then we'll put a price on the Crown land. Let's just say it's worth $100 billion for all the land on the reserves. We all agree that, of course, the rest of Canada doesn't necessarily agree, but we all agree that the rest of Canada owes us somewhere around $650 to $1 trillion. So let's just say it's 650, and the reserve land is worth $100 billion. So we'll say, look, we'll just, if you want to stay, that's fine. We'll buy the Crown land. We'll tell the rest of Canada, you don't owe us $650 billion anymore. You only owe us $550 billion, and we're keeping the Crown land. And then we will say to the reserves, like you have two choices. Like every single reserve can make this decision on their own. Like they can either come with us, and if they come with us, well then we'll buy the land, and they can either run it like a Hutterite colony, or they can take the number of acres on the reserve and they can divide it by the number of people and give everybody a certificate of ownership for their share of the Crown land. And my guess is they'll be quite excited about that, because for the first time in their lifetime, for the first time in our lifetime, they will actually be citizens like us living on their own land. There will be some challenges with that, but my guess is that the majority of them would vote to come with us.
Thank you.
And we give $20 billion for those two parks too, like Banff and Jasper, we could take another $10 billion off what they owe us for them.
Okay, we've got a question here.
This question goes to anybody that wants to answer. What's the plan B? Plan A looks pretty good, but what's plan B?
Plan A, B, C, D, and forever is we will win this the first time around. We can't lose it.
Here, here.
We're living in Plan B.
Two questions, but the first is, what is the process and who is responsible for writing up our Constitution? And what's the status of it now?
Yeah, please do, Dennis.
Okay. As I said earlier, we've thought through just about everything. We've already drafted an interim constitution. So on day one, the provincial government, which becomes ostensibly a sovereign Alberta government, has an interim constitution that they can work with. And then over the course of the next 6 or 12 months, there will be a constitutional conference in which a full constitution is drafted. And I might say that would include First Nations having constitutionalized, for example, the revenue sharing of the development and transport of our natural resources. But that is the idea, to have a constitutional conference, come up with a constitution and maybe more than one option, and then put it to the public for a vote as to which constitution and form of government you wish to have. That is the plan.
So Westminster versus Republic? That's
Okay.
all, yeah.
Well, that's another good question. And if you think about it, and if you've read anything on our website, what we are actually suggesting is that the easiest thing to do is to move from Alberta as a province within the Commonwealth to move from a province to a country, a sovereign country within the Commonwealth. Now, there are 56 Commonwealth countries, and 36 of them are constitutional republics. So in this decision-making as to what form of governance within the Commonwealth, we could very well become a constitutional republic, very much like the U.S., but actually the interim constitution that we're proposing, and Scott right here could even add to my comment, there's even an extra level of accountability built in. So we feel really very good about it. And it's a great question, and thank you for that question. Scott, you might want to add to.
Well,
Did you have another question?
yes, I do, but there's someone behind you there.
Oh, sorry.
Well, thank you. Dennis, I actually haven't looked at the Constitution you have on your website, but as you know, oh, it's not on there, okay. Well, sure. Well, as you know, you and I and about 40 other people spent a weekend in Lloydminster. I've lost track of how long ago that was, but the fellow that sort of coordinated that meeting, his name was Dale Wells, and he used to be, he used to be on Twitter under serious about leaving. But in any event, at the end of that weekend, we came up with a draft constitution that, I think, Art, you were there too, if I'm not mistaken. You were there that weekend, and like I say, we had about 40 or 50 people there. At the end of that, we drafted, like, this is a constitution would get a small country by for quite a while, you know what I mean? And so, like, that, I don't think it's possible to actually calculate how much work Dennis, myself, some of these people in the table have actually done on this already. It's sort of like growing bamboo, like where they say it takes 25 years to become an overnight success. Well, that, like, some of this movement has been going on for, about 20 years. And so a lot of the work is done. It's a matter of bringing it to fruition as the momentum builds.
Thank you. My second question was, I and quite a few people that I know believe that the key difference between us and Eastern Canada is not around the oil sands. It's around values. Values that we are capitalist. They are not. I'm going by voting. We are libertarian. They are not. We are Christian, or at least family valued. They are not. That's voting pattern shows that. I hope the Constitution does too. That's all I want to say.
Okay.
Hi. So we've been, as you said, 25 years, well, it's been longer than that because I'm a little older than 25, have been talking about separation, independence, and it's ideological. We need numbers. What I get asked all of the time is about my pension. What does it mean to me personally? How much is it going to cost for Canada to have its own police force? Corey, I read your book and I totally agree. We need to start pushing forward with our own pension plan, with our own police force, and start declaring some independence ahead of an independence vote. So people have a real world idea of what they're going to, what they can expect. My mother is in her 80s and her friends are all asking how much would their pension change. We don't have those numbers at this point in time. We haven't gotten those numbers from CPP at this point. We don't know how much a police force would cost, nor do we know how much it would cost to gain that independence. And they're worried. They're honestly worried. So I would like to, when I talk to them, be able to give them these numbers. Is that something we're close to?
I'll respond, and then Dennis probably wants to respond as well. I'm just going to give you what Danielle Smith has said. And she has said that regardless of the talks, Alberta premiums for an Alberta pension plan will be the same or lower, guaranteed. It's just, yes, they're still in negotiations, but that's a guarantee. And when it comes to the benefits, they will either be the same as the Canada pension plan or higher, guaranteed. That's from the Premier.
Yeah, really good, really great question. So let's put this in context. The circumstances are now that if you take the pension plan, we give $9 billion to Ottawa and we get back $6 billion. Okay, sitting in the pension plan, funds for Alberta, according to the Lightworks report, is about $370 billion when you add in the interest and the amount that we've contributed the last couple of years. That should come back to Alberta. Understand as well that every year we are giving about $70 billion to Ottawa through all forms of taxation, for which we get back 27. So imagine if we have that additional 33. That can supplement, the pension plan, and as was just stated by Vince, it could actually improve quite significantly as well. It doesn't matter for also, if Alberta is a sovereign nation, remember everybody in this room is still a Canadian citizen, right? But you can also become an Alberta citizen, i.e. there are many people who have dual citizenship. And what's really important to understand here, which I think is very persuasive in terms of benefit for people, is that you can have one person here who's a Canadian citizen and another person here who wants to retain their Canadian citizenship and pay taxes according to Canadian tax law, but you have another person who's a dual citizen as well, but makes the choice to pay Alberta tax law. The difference is massive. The person who lives in Alberta is going to pay less than 50% of the amount of taxes that the person who wants to pay taxes to Canada as well. So it's just something to think about. No, I don't know if that sufficiently answered your question.
Yeah, I think what I'm probably looking for is numbers. So if people are asking, how is it going to affect them, their own economic situation? The retirees want to know what their pension's going to be. I know Canada Pension Plan has said we're out to lunch with what our figures are, but haven't given us a figure. They want to know what it's actually going to cost to have our own police force, which we should have, just like Quebec and Ontario have.
Well, remember, we're paying for it now.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's what they want to do, is have that breakdown.
Yeah.
Is that breakdown on the APP side? I haven't seen it.
It's answered in the Q&A to an extent.
Okay.
There's, you can certainly look there. I was going to say something else in relation to this, and it just slipped my mind, but if I think about it, I'll bring it up again.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, all right. Anybody? Do you want to comment, Dan?
I do. And I have even though I have a Ukrainian name, I actually have Irish ancestors, and I got a mug for Christmas last year, and it said, "You know you're Irish if you have absolutely no idea how to make a long story short." But in any event, I'll try. But the fact of the matter is, they will be better off. And Dennis pointed this out earlier, we send about $70 billion to Ottawa. They send back 27, 30 billion. So there's a $40 billion difference. 20 billion of that is what they call the cost of providing us with services. So and then 20 billion is the 20 billion that they've kept every year for the last 31 years, which is how we got to 630 billion that we think they owe us. But even if you take the $20 billion it's basically $10 billion in labor, where the labor is working in Ottawa and Hull, and $10 billion in actually costs, like the price of the gas and the price of the building and the rent and one thing and another. But if you bring those jobs back to Alberta, then you have $10 billion of job creation with people, instead of working in Ottawa and Hull, they're working in Lethbridge and Red Deer and Medicine Hat and Lloydminster and Grand Prairie. And when the Tech Frontier mine had spent $1 billion getting regulatory approval, and I've just sort of lost track, but I think it was 1.5 billion over 10 years they were going to spend on the Tech Frontier mine, and they were talking about what a tremendous boost to the Alberta economy that would be. Well, if we brought all those jobs, like having our own pension, our own police and everything, if we brought the administration of that back to Alberta, it would be a $10 billion mega project every year. And as far as the police is concerned, the last time I looked, I'm sure it's gone up, but it was the cost of the RCMP in Alberta is about 400, maybe 450 billion. It was 400 billion the last time I was running, which was in 2015. Billion. Oh, no, 450 million. I'm sorry, 450 million. Yeah, you get talking about billions, first thing you know, we'll be talking about trillions here if we're not careful. But it was 400 million, but Alberta was already paying 259 million of it. Like the federal government was only paying, what is that, 30 or 40%. And so we'd be far better off to just have it all here and just, and at one point, Ed Stelmach signed a contract for another 10 years. But if you had to, you could just tell the RCMP, look, the contract is over, we're canceling it. Whatever you think the payout on it is, we'll take that off of the 650 billion we owed you. We're starting a new contract if you want. And the last time I talked to some of my RCMP friends, they said they thought 80% of the people would take a patch over to an Alberta provincial police force. Of course, we would guarantee them, as you pointed out, Vince, we would guarantee them everything that was in their contract, maybe plus a little bit more. Plus, they wouldn't have to worry about the government going broke and them not getting what was in their contract. And I think that's the answer you should have for your friends. Just say, look, it will be as much or more as anything you're getting, and you can take our word for it. And if you won't take my word for it, you can take Dennis's and Vince's. Just remember, okay?
All right, my mind twigged again, and I remembered what I was going to say. So remember the Trans Mountain Pipeline, it was owned by Enbridge, and they had a certain cost to finish it. That was etched in stone. When the federal government bought Trans Mountain, they finished it at 5 times the amount that Enbridge was going to spend to finish it. That speaks to inefficiency, something that everybody should know. When you purchase a product or a service from private enterprise and you spend $1 for it, when you purchase that same product or service from the federal government, it costs you $3. Okay, Trans Mountain was 5 times the amount. So process that, internalize it from the perspective of understanding how much better off we would be if we weren't giving all this money to Ottawa and having it churn through the bureaucracy, and then we get back a fraction of it.
Thank you. Now, Corey.
Yeah, I just want to quickly, but something we got to watch ourselves with is bewaring the rabbit holes of what-isms, what-ifs, because we can spend 6 more hours and have 10 more pension plans proposed by people, but they're very important questions at the same time. A person's very concerned. If they're relying on that pension, they want to know they can pay the bills. They're not going to vote on a variable. But I just want to mention, Todd had mentioned a white paper, for example, and I'd done a couple of events with Rebel, actually, and Ezra got up and he mentioned something really interesting. I'm going to follow up with him on that, was the Bloc Québécois and the Parti Québécois actually contracted a bunch of academics, others, and built a 7-volume document of answering any question they could possibly imagine in depth on, so they can answer all those variables at meetings like this. So not just as we said, which we'd like you to take our word for it, but as you're saying, you want numbers, you want to say point at this so I can see. And that's a task we have to take on so that we can give quicker answers or at least point people more quickly to something like that. I'm going to get Ezra to send that to me. It needs to be translated, and I'm sorry, my Yiddish is better than my French. But we'll get that. I mean, we don't have to have the same answers as Quebec, but they have a lot of the same common questions. If you're talking about a new nation, there's no sense reinventing a lot of those wheels, too. So there are questions that have to be answered, but it's going to take us a few more months to really get a good spot to hammer them out.
Okay, great. Thank you.
In regards to that point, if you need a translator, call me. I speak French too. I lived there in Quebec for 20 years. My question is not necessarily about Quebec specifically, it's about the support within the UCP caucus and within the UCP membership. Can you expand on the support that the independence movement has within the UCP?
All right, it's good to have some connections. Internal polling with respect to UC membership is that something in the order of 65 to 70% of UCP members are in support of Alberta sovereignty. So that's an important number. And now, granted, that is a poll. And I want to comment on polls just for a second, because as Corey pointed out, depending on the poll that is conducted, you might see that we have 1/3, maybe as high as 40%, maybe as high as 44%. It depends on where the poll was conducted. But there's another fact here, and that is we still live in an era of cancel culture. And when people are polled a question that might have implications for them if they answer honestly, for example, you saw what happened during the trucker convoy when people donated money to the trucker convoy. Many of them had their accounts frozen. So this issue of cancel culture is still quite important. So I'm not certain of what the accuracy of polling is right now, but I'm going to give you 2 proxies to think about. One was one that Corey already brought up, or somebody did, and that was the equalization referendum. When 62% of Albertans voted to end equalization, could that be a proxy for how that same 62% would feel about a poll or a sovereignty question? I don't know the answer to that. But here's another proxy question. A few months back, polling indicated that there wasn't an appetite for an Alberta pension plan. Well, if you saw Rick Bell's report the other day, UCP polling revealed that the appetite for an Alberta pension plan is now 55%, which is interesting. So hundreds of town hall leaders and much discussion amongst people has moved that needle towards being favorably disposed to a pension plan. So take polling for what it is. It's an estimate, but in cancel culture time, is it that accurate? And I don't know the answer to the question. I'm just suggesting for all of you to think about the accuracy of polling.
Another question as well, the second question, in regards to the policy and compliance and governments. Right now, the UCP is currently starting their round of questions for policy and governments that will be held at the AGM in November in Edmonton. And please, if you haven't gone to the AGM last year, please do so this year. Please, please, please. In regards to the policy and governments and compliance for the UCP, what I heard is that there's some constituency associations that are very reluctant to have any kind of propositions and or policies in regards to any kind of policy that lead or facilitate independence or for members. What is... Do you guys have a status on that, or what's the, maybe Vince can answer that more effectively?
Yeah, I haven't mentioned it, but I was on the board of directors for the UCP provincially, and I'm now the CA president for Edmonton Southwest. And so your question, so there's a number of people here who petitioned sort of stepped out of their lane, so to speak, by some people viewed it at the last AGM with regards to the Bill of Rights, and it rankled a few feathers, and I personally think that it was good what happened. It was a very healthy discussion, and it helped in the fact that people normally at a policy AGM, you have three people who come up and speak one way and three people who speak the other way, and then we vote, and that's it. But because the Bill of Rights was such an issue, we had much more discussion on it, and that was very healthy. But in retrospect, I think that the better way to go when it comes to things like the Bill of Rights and this question within the UCP is to call a special general meeting. So it's a moment where the UCP can discuss the pros and cons and the benefits and the drawbacks of each of the possible avenues going forward, and it doesn't conflict with the regular AGM. I think we've called one special general meeting so far before, and it doesn't always have to be about punting a premier.
No. This is just policy-wise.
In fact, I think it would be very reassuring for our current premier, because within the UCP there is a strong independence sentiment, but there is also a very strong support for our premier and a respect for the fact that she feels obligated to sit this one out because of her role as a public servant, which literally means serving the public, not the UCP, but the entire public. So my personal view is the approach on this would be, rather than make it a policy and governance thing for the next AGM, call a special general meeting, which means me and 21 others petitioning the board for a special meeting. Personally, I'd love to see it in Lloydminster.
Awesome. Thanks.
I just want to, if I can, speak just a little bit about the money issue. So good questions by Barb. One of the things that we can tell people is that by law under the Canada Pension Act is that we can't have any less than what we're already getting, and we're not going to pay any more. So it's the same deal or better. And with respect to the RCMP and replacing them, at some point it looks like the feds may actually get out of provincial policing. If they don't, the Premier has already started to fill the many gaps, 20%. We're paying for 100%, but we're only getting 80% of the officers on the road. And so she's starting to give more powers to the sheriffs, increasing their units. So she's prepared. She also has the grant for communities to look at other options. So if the RCMP does leave, we'll probably buy all their cars and all their guns, and like somebody had mentioned, we'll patch over. I would like to thank Todd for bringing this really excellent panel. And I own full copyright on this, so don't use it or I'll sue you. But this is excellent. I look at you guys as the fathers of deconfederation, so trademark. But it just kind of piqued an interest and a question for any of the panel. Going forward, after the Citizens Initiative is done and the province or the Elections Alberta goes through the signatures to make sure they're all good, and then we get into the actual campaign, I would love to see, and I don't know if anyone's thought of it, have basically a summit of people like yourselves and maybe the other parties or whatever come together, because we need to win this sucker. And we need everybody, as I think all of you spoke, we're only together on one issue. And we may not like each other sometimes, but has anyone thought of that at all? Or
Good question.
And Danny, you should probably weigh in on this question as well. But I think what you've said, Scott, is absolutely essential. Even though the various independence parties, the number of people who supported them was small, it's still a significant number of people, and there are people around those independence parties that are larger than the ones that actually voted. So I would very much like to see, because there are many other freedom movements, not just parties, but the freedom movements. And so messaging really is that you take all of the independence parties, all of the freedom movements, and have them funneled down to one question, one issue, and that is support for the referendum on Alberta sovereignty and the importance of registering their contact information, at least with us, so we have a good idea of where we're at. And although we've got around 250,000 people registered now, we're aiming for 800,000 to 1 million by the end of August or September. Danny, do you want to add to that, of getting everybody together here?
I do, because I think this truly is an all hands on deck situation. And I was in Carstairs last, I guess it was last Saturday, wasn't it? We were in Carstairs, and somebody said, well, we should merge all the independence parties into one party. And I said, well, you know, Danielle Smith and Jim Prentice thought about that. They decided to merge the two parties into one party. I said, did that benefit anybody here in the room? Did it benefit anybody in this room, the fact that they decided to merge the two together? No. And then, you know, a few years later, we sort of survived that, and Brian Jean, you know, went to a big speech in Calgary and said, oh, I've asked Jason Kenney to put on his dancing shoes, and Jason Kenney said, I'll take you up on that. And with all due respect to the PC party, like they were dead and in their grave, all we had to do was go to their funeral and say a prayer and kick dirt in on top of them. We'd have never seen him again. But anyway, Jason Kenney breathed life back into him, and next thing you know, we had a United Conservative Party, and about a year after we'd all been united, Jason Kenney said about throwing all us Wild Rosers out again. So, like, I'm really big on all working together, but I'm not big on like merging into one unit. But I think what will happen as this unfolds is, like, everybody can get out and campaign to win the referendum so we can get out of this country. And as the campaign unfolds, I think it'll become clear, like once we win the referendum, who should lead going forward. And I've had more than, you know, one person say to me, well, what are you going to do if the Alberta Prosperity Project wants to start a political party? I said, well, I'm going to donate money to them and hope they win. You know what I mean? But in any event, like let's worry about winning the referendum first, and then we'll worry about who gets to the top of Mount Everest. But just before I sit down, I want to comment on your cancel culture, Dennis, because that is a really important thing that we all have to be aware of. Besides being involved in the Wild Rose Party, we have a little group called the Economic Education Association, and we've hosted Freedom Talk conferences since about 2014. And again, Kevin Avram helped us with that. But at one of our conferences, John Carpy was
going to be one of the speakers. And he had just been in a kerfuffle where he was in trouble for having said something about the Gay Pride Parade. So it was a Sunday afternoon, our conference was starting on Friday. It was a Sunday afternoon. I got a call from CBC, and she said, well, I understand that John Carpy is going to be speaking at your conference. And I said, yes, he is. She said, well, are you aware of what he said about, the gay pride flag or whatever? And I said, well, I'm aware of it. I don't actually know what I said. But she said, well, are you still going to let him speak? And I said, well, if I didn't invite anybody to speak that hadn't said something awkward in their life, I'd have no one to come to my meeting. So I said, of course we're going to have him come and speak. So anyway, she called back later, so anyway, she actually wrote a pretty good article in the Calgary paper. But anyway, the next morning, Danielle's producer, when she was the host on the radio show, the producer called and said, that some people had been complaining to them about, what he had said and about the fact that John was going to be speaking at this conference. And she said, would you like to come on the talk show at 9:30? And I said, I'm pretty good on the wheat board and carbon and one thing and another, but when it comes to gay pride flags, I'm sort of outside of my scope of understanding. And so I said, how about if we get my friend John Robson to come on with you? So anyway, John Robson came on and presented, our defense of why John Carpy was going to be speaking. And over the course of the 2-hour show, Danielle said, well, what do you think about John Carpy speaking at this conference? Do you think he should be excluded or not? And I just forget the numbers now, but I think she had 264 people texted in and said no. I think Danielle was speaking at that conference too, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, it was about 264 people text no, he should be able to speak, and 2 people texted in and said no, he shouldn't be allowed to. Well, anyway, the next, Monday or Tuesday, I get a call from the Port of Call where we're having the conference, and the general manager said, well, actually, we're pretty concerned. We've had, several complaints about some of your speakers, and we're just worried about there being an incident. So anyway, I said, so yeah, I know what you're talking about, but I said, this is what happened. I said, Danielle had 264 people in favor of him and 2 people against. We still hired extra security because they were outside. We were lucky it was 40 some below, so we thought, thank you, God. There are, So anyway, they were protesting outside. But again, coming back to the council culture, if they'd have said, well, no, we're not having you, or if we'd have said, oh, well, we won't have him, then it means that 2 people would have negated the vote of 164 people who wanted to hear him. So anyway, this is another thing when we're talking about all the bullshit they're going to put towards us. A lot of it will be this cancel culture stuff where they're trying to, undermine any of us that are trying to move the project forward. So we're going to have to be really, really tough to do this, but I think we can do it.
I just wanted to say that the beauty of the citizen-initiated referendum is that it goes past all of the political party shenanigans. It's direct democracy, really, and it's yes or no. And we can have NDP that come and vote for separation, right? That's a possibility. In fact, I think in one of the polls I saw it was around 8% of NDPers, which surprised me. But traditionally, that's what has been our big problem. So I really want to thank our Premier for making citizen-initiated referendums a real possibility. I think that's one of the best things that we've seen for democracy in a very long time. So,
folks, just in the interest of time, I just can't tell you how much I appreciate that everybody's stuck with us for the better part of a Saturday afternoon here. If it's all right, we're going to maybe have 1, 2 questions, 3 at the most, and we're going to wrap it up with final comments here, if that's okay. So, Dave, over to you folks.
Yes, gentlemen, thank you so much for the information, and certainly been a great panel to listen to. I have to tell you that I guess I'm a hardline independence person, very hard. My history, I should give it to you. My name is Art Hanger. I was a reformer. Went down there with Preston Manning back in 1993. And in 2000, the reins were handed over to the Conservatives. Now, this was after years of Liberal government. And Hugh Siegel, who was a senator at the time, came up to me in an installation event where Burt Brown, the only elected senator we've ever had, was installed. And Hugh Siegel said to me, he's a longtime Tory hack, I guess, but he come up and he says, Art, he says, I wanted to shake your hand. He says, for all the work that you reformers did. And he says, I want to thank you. Now that you have given us the reins, we'll take it from here. And that's exactly what has happened in Ottawa since that time. It doesn't matter what party you put in there, it's the same. I don't care if it's Conservative or if it's Liberal, it's the same. It's just a matter of degree, unfortunately. Now, I guess I'm suspicious of so much, even on this legislation that's coming through. I don't know much about the Referendum Act. I don't even know what the regulations are going to be when they open or when they pass the act and they set the orders in council, which they can control totally through the government of the day. So I'm not sure how that's all going to play out for us, how much difficulty there will be in reaching those particular points. But I'm suspicious up until the very end that I see it. So I guess I'm going to be far short of passing on any accolades to the Premier at this point in time. Yes, you lowered the bar, but what else is going to be happening, I don't know. I'd like to see it all play out first. So I am told that there's a required number of 177,000 citizens to set the Citizens Initiative matter ahead to demand a referendum. How many signatures are required for the referendum itself for that to pass? And I ask that question because I don't think the Clarity Act is clear on that point. So what would that number be?
You bring up a really excellent question, because as you know, Art, and you know, I've had many conversations, but fundamentally the Clarity Act does say that it has to be a clear question, and I've read you the question, and it couldn't be any clearer in my mind. And it has to be a clear outcome. Now, this conflicts with international law in a way in which, if, for example, international law is 50% plus one, and it's up to the House of Commons to determine whether or not there's a clear mandate from the people that might be 55%, 60%, or 65%, that is an issue. That's a serious issue. And all I can say to you is that what we are expecting and what we are hoping is that with a successful referendum, and if it's 50% plus one or greater, that the first thing that will happen is the next day the U.S. government acknowledges that Alberta is a sovereign nation as a result of that referendum. And the second thing that I want to see happen, that we're hoping will happen, is that the Premier, in her own words, has said, I will respect the result of the referendum, meaning that that should be 50% plus one, which, although it may fly in the face of the Clarity Act, the reality is 50% plus one represents the expressed democratic will of the majority of the people that voted on that referendum. So now, there's what we expect is that there's now about 2.8, and it could be up to 3 million eligible voters. Last we checked, it was 2.8 million eligible voters. That being the case, what we're looking at in terms of a plurality for a successful referendum, we're looking at least 1.5, and we'd like to see it closer to 1.7 million people that vote in favor of the referendum, which is why, in my mind, we want to wait before we submit the petition question. Because imagine 177,000, rather, we're at 250,000 people that have registered. Around that 250,000 people is a larger number that will support the referendum. But if we're at 1 million people by the end of September, for example, that have registered their intent to support a referendum on independence, around that 1 million people is a much bigger group that gets us closer to the point of success. I'm not sure that satisfactorily or fully answered your question, but I think that might be the best I can do at this particular time.
Well, I guess it's going to be an unknown then as to where that threshold will actually be, whether it's 50% plus 1. But I understand your point that it will be pressed by those that are pushing this issue, which is the citizens of the province. 50% plus 1 is sufficient.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting to see what's happening in some of the constituency associations in Quebec, where it's boiled down to one vote difference. One vote difference. And yet, one vote difference is in that particular riding might be 0.0001% of the people that voted. You know, that's democracy. That's a plurality. That's a winning number. It should be 50% plus 1, period.
Now, just another question here on the ballot. My understanding that there's going to be more than one referendum question. And that troubles me because if you have a clear answer or we have a clear answer, then another question could be, well, maybe about a pension or maybe about some other issue that makes it look like we're still in Canada and this is what the question is asking. You know.
Yeah. This is a really, really important point, and what the importance of this can't be understated. Imagine you're going to the polls, okay, and you're looking at a ballot, and it's got. Do you agree that the province of Alberta shall become a sovereign country and cease to be a province within Canada or of Canada? But then you have, under that, you've got other choices. Do you agree with an Alberta pension plan? Do you agree with taking control of immigration? Do you agree with this, that, and the other thing? Just like you said, it muddies the water. So Vince, you don't know this, but what's coming is what we've just drafted. And it should occur at a special general meeting of the UCP. These are 2 resolutions that we're going to submit. The first one is that, do you agree that this is the question that should go forward in the referendum? And we provide the evidence for that and the benefit to the government and to Alberta. The second question is, do you agree that there should be a single ballot question on Alberta sovereignty? That's the other resolution that we're planning. We've already drafted it. I've sent it to Mitch, and I've also sent it to Daryl Comic. So you'll get it as well. And it's and I've spoken to Ray Strom about it as well. And for those of you don't know, Ray is on the board of directors of the UCP, and he's in charge of policy and governance. Does that answer your question, Art?
Yes, I see things are in motion then. The other point, I guess, just a comment. When you had the referendum or the meeting in Calgary, you had something like 1,200 people show up. I did notice there that there were a number of young guys, say around 25 to 35, that had a lot of questions to ask. but I haven't seen this in any other meetings, where you have the next generation, people just into the workforce, and they're looking to find themselves a home or a future, and they're not finding it, but they're showing up and they're hearing some of this stuff. So that's, to me, is going to be what tips the scales. If we can't attract them, then we're not going to tip the scales on this referendum.
You're right with that, and I just have two comments about that, Art. In the U.S., winning the last election, the youth vote did come out, and they came out because they wanted a future, and they recognized, with respect to taxation and regulation, there was a better option for them. In Alberta, we're seeing the same thing, and what you pointed out is true. There were a number of young people at that event in Calgary. We had the same sort of outcome that took place in Ponoka the other day. There were a number of young people there as well, and it was a sellout. We're starting to resonate, I think, with a lot more young people who realize that they're never going to be able to afford a house. They may not be able to afford purchasing a car outright, and they may be destined to be able to only rent. They may not be able to sufficiently plan for their future, and they're starting to recognize that, which I think is the reason why part of the reason why we're seeing a swing in support of the Alberta sovereignty movement. But it's an excellent question, and thank you for asking them.
Folks, I've just got to say this again. Thank you so much for coming out today. Dennis, Corey, Michael, Vince, Danny, it truly has been my honor to share the stage with you today. I hope that this has been helpful. I hope this has been thought-provoking. I'm going to leave this with you. My parting comments: a glorious future awaits. This is nothing to be afraid of, to be concerned about. This is putting the foundation in place for prosperity for generations to come. I would have answered Barb's question, and I would have added this. When it comes down to it, if we do this and we put the foundation in place in our society, we will unlock trillions of dollars of investment in our society and everything that goes along with it. Thanks for coming, folks.